Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today on J Slay Made in the USA, where we explore truth, expose deception, and inspire courage. Guys, we've upgraded. We're in a studio today, and I've got a really fun one for you. You know, there's a mayor race going on right here in the city of Franklin, and it's kind of getting heated. You know, the mainstream media's heavily involved. You've got the establishment versus the freedom fighter. And I am really excited today to introduce my guest, Gabrielle Hanson. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Gabrielle, let's start with a really easy one. You know, you were an alderman here in Franklin, and I believe for 2 years, and then you decided, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and run for mayor. So why did you decide to do it?
Well, it wasn't for the $20,000 a year that the job pays. I got on the inside and I realized that not everyone's voice was being heard, and there was money being spent that wasn't known to the public, and a lot of back-ended dealing. And I said, nope. I said, it's time that the existing mayor runs against somebody else. He's not been opposed in quite some time.
How long has it been?
At least 2 election cycles, maybe 3.
And those are 4-year
Four-year terms.
Okay, yeah, it's time to be opposed. So it was based around some corruption that you saw, maybe more so that, or I shouldn't say more so. What about the direction of the city, the kind of direction that we're headed? How about that aspect?
Well, I heard it said a few years ago, it was perfect as an airplane anomaly of you're just off course just a little bit until you're completely turned the other direction. Mm-hmm. Well, we're about 3/4 the other direction because we've gotten off course on especially social issues that are changing our culture and threaten the traditional values in Franklin.
Yes, I would agree with that, but I wanted to get another easy one out of the way. So I printed out the municipal city election information, all right? This is right off the website, so hopefully my printer worked correctly. To be eligible for an elected office, candidates must be a resident of the state of Tennessee for more than a year and a resident of the city of Franklin for at least 6 months immediately preceding their election to office. So mainstream media right now, Channel 5, they're running stories saying, well, we don't even know if she lives here. How you couldn't have been an alderman if you didn't live here, correct?
I could not have been an alderman. I could have not have shown up at all the meetings, met with my constituents, sold 150 homes a year, and bought all those cups of coffee at our locally owned small businesses and not lived here.
So how does a media outlet get away with running a story like that that's just so obviously, you know, based on a falsehood? How are they doing that?
Well, I look at it as a paid advertorial.
Okay.
I'm not sure who's paying for it, but it is like an advertorial format. And they're welcome to say whatever they want to because we know that there's fake news. We know that there's spin. And it's whatever sells is what they're going to try to report, and they'll adjust as needed. As the ratings diminish, then they'll try to switch it to something else. They can say whatever they want to, and as an elected official, there are some anti-SLAPP laws that make it hard for a public official to defend themselves against public retaliation verbally or accusatory things. So it does make it harder for an elected official to retaliate, but I'm just going to let them run with it. If they're having a good time, go ahead. There must not be anything else to report on right now.
Yeah, and you've got the receipt. I mean, you could show a home mortgage anytime they needed to see it.
Oh, anytime.
All right, well, easy enough then. I just wanted to clear the air on that because that just seems so silly to me. Last night, I dropped a pretty big podcast. A lot of people watched, but I got a couple interesting phone calls where they said, I don't really know Gabrielle. I've not paid it too much of attention. What's her faith background? So I wanted to hear if you're willing to share a little bit on your faith background and what informs your beliefs.
Sure. I was raised in a Christian household, but like so many kids, when you leave home and the world becomes alluring and going out with your friends and getting up on Sunday mornings a little harder. You put your faith kind of on the back burner. Yeah. You still love the Lord, and I even continued tithing, but I didn't honor the Lord, which was a big difference. And a wedge got drawn in between the Lord and myself, and I ended up in a not so great position. I'm sure everybody's heard about the answering the phone calls and with a promotion of prostitution charge. And that was like my real come back to Jesus moment, thinking, what have I done? Like, how could I turn my back on God? How could I not put him first? And when I went through all that and got to Illinois and filed bankruptcy, was pretty much my lowest point in my life, and totally starting over. And God was the entire start over for me, and He became the absolute center. I'm a spirit-filled, born-again Christian, believe in a fivefold ministry, and I believe that the God I serve is still in the business of doing miracles. And as that faith grew and my walk was enhanced and deepened with God, I found myself around 2009, 2010, realizing that Chicago was pretty a godless place. And I was just yearning for more from the Lord and in an environment to raise my daughter in that had more a God-centric position in it. So that's when I really cranked up my faith, and I call it jumping off that cliff with God and seeing
Yeah.
if He'd catch me, knowing that I heard Him, but it sure looked crazy.
Yeah.
But you can see my testimony on my website under my
Okay.
story, and it tells you how I got here, and it was 150% God
Yeah.
that got me here.
Well, that's excellent. I appreciate the transparency on that. But I do have a question about one thing. From what I've heard, you said you were answering the phones but you didn't know, right? I mean, you were working for a modeling agency, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
was a modeling and entertainment company.
That had a real mainstream component of their business, right?
They had a real business, a real location, really doing business, but on the side they had a pretty hefty casting couch, from what I understand.
Okay.
And
That you were not aware of.
I worked from home. They would forward a
Okay.
phone out to me, and I would answer the phone. We did not have cell phones back then. It was a landline. So I would just call in the names, numbers, and dates at the end of my shift, and I didn't really know, honestly, what was going on. I never saw any of the money. I was making $10 an hour.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, when they hear, a repentance story, but it's merged with there's this thing that you didn't know about, they can marry those things in their minds and think, well, maybe she did do something. So I'm glad you cleared the air on that, because I had heard that, there was a mainstream component of the business, and then there was a little side gig that you didn't know about. So in that case, I would say no harm, no foul, to be honest,
Well, you're at a pretty low point when you're
Sure.
finally getting out of college. You think everything's going to go great, and then you realize you've been involved in something and you were stupid and had no idea, and now you've got a legal charge and you don't understand the
Right.
system. It's a pretty scary time in your life and a time to really reevaluate.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, good deal. Lots of Franklin residents may not actually understand the role of mayor or alderman. I know that I had no clue what they did if you were to ask me pre-COVID. And then all of a sudden I realized, well, these aldermen, they kind of matter. So people start paying attention. But there's still, I'm sure, many folks that don't know. Tell us about the difference in those roles and what influence the mayor has that the alderman may not.
The Board of Mayor and Aldermen is really like a city council system. It's just an English term for your service as an alderman. And we have a weak mayor system, which means he only votes in the case of a tiebreaker. However, in the day-to-day activities, this mayor is the one that sets the tone and gives commands and orders and directive to our city manager to carry out. So very much he's responsible, or should be responsible, for things going on within the city. And I believe that this current mayor has been a little more passive and has turned the helm over to our city manager most of the time. So some of the decisions we're seeing are less mayor directive and more city manager directive.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about one that would have been near and dear to me. Before I left my career, I actually worked a lot with the city of Franklin, with Williamson County, doing roofing and waterproofing projects as a manufacturer's rep. And I was on that city hall roof all the time because it leaks. It leaks.
Yes.
And I was always I was like, man, I hope that they build that new thing because maybe I'll get the roof job. And I was building a relationship. Now I'm looking at it from a little different perspective. Those are our tax dollars at work. So sure, I want them to have a nice new roof. But what do you think about the potential for a new city hall, as well as what you said with the mayor's influence over that and the city manager's influence over that?
We do need a new city hall, and you've structurally seen it. It's a disaster. It is past its usable life. We have a lot of wasted space inside, but I'm not convinced that it needs to go where it is projected to go, right in the same spot when we have
Okay.
an alternative. And I'm very concerned about the cost of it at over $100 million.
It's hefty.
I have reached out to 4 different global real estate entities to get pricing based on the numbers and the stats that they provided us with. And I said, this seems awfully high. And they're like, yes, you should be able to build a Class A office space for 600 a square foot easily, maybe 800, but 1,000 a foot, absolutely not, even with a below grade garage. And the problem I see with the city hall they're projecting is this has been a staff driven directive. This is people who will work from home sometimes, who may not even be employed in 5-10 years, giving directive on how much light they want coming in windows, how open they want it on the inside, this grand staircase that could be $500,000 to $1 million to rival that of Bone and Joints, beautiful lobby. Do we really need all that? We just need a functional Class A office space that is representative of our city, that really helps our staff be as proficient and productive as possible, and a place for our citizens to come. And I think we're way overspending, way overbuilding, and I do still think we have an alternative site where we could put it and save money.
Okay, and save money to the tune, if I did the math in my head, which I probably didn't do it correctly, maybe $40 million in savings. You could probably get a nice city hall done that's worthy of our city for $60 million instead of $100.
Yes, and you and I both know that governments are not good at managing costs. So this is a time
they build
when
palaces to celebrate themselves.
that's right. It's like a Taj Mahal, an edifice
That's right.
to self, as I have called
Wow,
it.
yeah.
But I think that we can save the money. I think it's time for us to put our business hat on and not our government hat. They say, well, the cost of construction is going to go up, but I'm going to tell you construction is slowing down. So there's contractors who
That's
really
right.
want the work, who will give us a good bid and do a fantastic job at cost savings.
That makes sense. All right, back to my list here. What do you see, Gabrielle, as the biggest upcoming issues that the alderman and mayor might have to vote on that affects Franklin?
Well, we have a lot. I think a $300 million infrastructure expansion in the southeast is a big thing we're looking at. How are we going to best manage that and manage taxpayer dollars and not burden our taxpayers with property tax increases? And then I think there's going to be more of cultural attacks and things that are more divisive as we go down that path of racial terror markers. We're going to have to be very cautious with how we vote and what we're voting on. But again, the mayor sets the tone and the agenda. So that's why we keep going back to how does this get in front of the city council for a vote in the first place.
Explain. Very interesting point. Explain that racial terror markers. That just, I may have not been paying attention to that particular issue, but what is that?
That is an initiative under the current mayor with his Unite Williamson. He is in love with the Lynching Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and he thought it would be wonderful to bring a historical marker type plaque into Franklin that commemorates in full morbid detail the death of an individual at the hands of a white person during the civil rights era, and honor those people on that plaque.
Does he not see the greater war that's going on, where this is being shoved down our throats from everywhere, from Hollywood to education? It's just like anything we can do to put a black eye on historical America. Not that we don't want our history told. I listened to his Q&A time he did in West Haven, and he said he was informed by Rabbi Laurie Rice, this rabbi out of Nashville, on that issue. It's like, why wouldn't you go? That's not even in Franklin, first of all. So I guess my question is, does a guy like him, is he totally on the progressive train in terms of believing everything they believe regarding social justice and reparations and all those things that seem to be coming down the pike?
For the things that are in our pipeline, it appears that he is. When I ran for alderman, I met with him, and he was very clear that he was purple, and he was very proud of it. And his wife laughingly said, "Oh, you're the most purple person I know."
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, I don't think I'd brag about that, but he was very proud of being purple. I know that the first plaque was a Jewish man who was actually killed for hiring someone that was black. So that may be where Laurie Rice came in. but it's very divisive. The Black community just wants to move on. They want to celebrate their successes. They don't want a further wedge driven. And the more danger that we're in with these, and most of the public doesn't know this, and it's odd, and I've looked at it and I still don't know what the motive was, but in 2018, Haslam, our then governor, repealed the statute of limitations on civil rights crimes.
Okay.
So that opens up a victim status pipeline. So if we can get a racial terror marker, we can go back and open up a case as a victim, and that can lead to damages or reparations.
Yeah, because that's what we really need to be spending our time on.
That's right.
100, 200-year-old
Memphis is
things.
looking at it. San Francisco. Why not Franklin, right?
Yeah, that is a great point. And when you say, or when he is proudly purple, that's one thing I think everybody needs to realize is our entire nation has taken a sharp leftward turn in terms of what's even acceptable to talk about, what's being taught in schools. So to remain purple means you're basically a Democrat from 5 years ago.
Yes.
That's all it is. So, yeah, very, very insightful. You have spoken a lot about the surge of growth projected for Franklin over the next 10 years. Do you see that as a problem or a good thing? And how will that wild growth intersect with your role as mayor if elected?
Well, people say that we could double our population over the next 20 years, or at least in the next 10, like by 40,000 people. We're at 88,700 roughly right now. But if we don't build all those apartments, will they really come? So how do we know they're going to come if we don't provide the housing? And a builder recently sent a letter stating they thought it would be in our best interest to maybe adopt the Minneapolis style of no more single-family zoning and all multifamily only.
Okay.
And I said, wait a minute, this puts a burden on our schools, our fire, our roadways. It changes our population. People who, I've rented. I rented here for 4 years. But people who are stakeholders permanently with home ownership tend to behave differently than people who are transient stakeholders and just passing through. And not every renter is going to just be passing through, but we do need to consider what we're doing. And is that really the character of Franklin, to build middle eights everywhere and put 250 apartments on a very small parcel of land? Do we really just want to be a 15-minute city? Do we just want to be a smart city where we're controlling everybody to little small sections of town? Or do we want to be that single-family home where kids can run and play and ride their bikes and the dogs in the backyard? And I believe that we need to focus on the quality of the lifestyle in Franklin and the quality of people that can live here from every socioeconomic background, whether they are wealthy and can afford the $1 million home or whether they need that workforce housing at $450,000.
Right. So rather than prepare for something that we don't know is going to happen, let's respond as we need to who's actually moving in. And those numbers seem wild to me. So we got 88,000 people approximately right now in Franklin, and you said over 10 years that could double. Who's
They're
coming up
saying
with
in
that
20
projection?
years
Who's
it
they?
could double. The prognosticators of population out there based on our growth pattern in the last 10 or 15 years.
Have we doubled? And you may not know this. Have we
In
doubled in the last?
2012, we were at 66,000 people roughly, and now we're at 88.
In 2012, so that's 10 years ago. And I would think most people would say we've had pretty crazy growth here. So to say in another 10 years we would double the 88, so put us at approximately 170,000.
They're saying about 125 in 10 years.
Okay.
But then in 20 years, it would be probably 160,000 roughly.
And is that due to the attractiveness of Middle Tennessee and people, coming here from New York and California and, like in my neighborhood, everybody's moving in from the West Coast. Is that what that's from?
Low property taxes, conservative values, very traditional, safe. They've bought into the PR that's been coming out of Middle Tennessee and Williamson County and Franklin. Great place to send your kids to a public school, supposedly. And then the pensions are tax-free in the state of Tennessee, which is also very appealing because there is a lot of pension money coming from what are typically the blue states.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. You've already spoken to that one. Why is the establishment and the media establishment in this particular case with this race going after you so hard? Because it feels like this is bigger than a normal mayor's run. What are they afraid of?
Well, truly, I believed that I was entering a small town race to be the mayor to make sure that we remained like a Hallmark movie type of city, wholesome and traditional and free from the chaos in the rest of the world.
Which,
But
speaking of, there is a Hallmark movie that's like made around like that little bookstore in downtown
it
Franklin.
is,
So that's like a real
yes,
thing.
it is. So that's the feel people have, and that's what I thought I was jumping into until I realized this is much larger and has much more significance, not only to Franklin, but to our state and potentially to our nation. Williamson County has been in the top 10 wealthiest counties in America for many years. Franklin is the county seat. If they topple Franklin, they can take the rest of the county. If they can take Williamson County, they can take our state, and it's pretty much over for our nation. We have some of the strongest patriots that have moved in here. It's like the last frontier, the most patriotic Americans who will fight for this country and our freedoms. And they know if they can take us out, they've got the rest of the country. And I never really thought about it until I finally sat down and looked at what was at play. And I do believe that that's why I'm getting backlash even from a state level, because the only thing standing in the way of maybe a one-party system or any kind of corruption or shenanigans that have been going on are me and 3 aldermen that are running that are also patriots and conservative Christians. And we could really put a monkey wrench in anything that's been going on, because we're real direct, real honest, and expect forthright behavior out of everybody.
Yeah.
It's a serious time. It's really like the next Battle of Franklin. This is truly for our heart and soul.
Yeah, I felt that as well, that Franklin's kind of the key to the door that opens up the rest of the state and the rest of the country. So it's definitely a battleground. With COVID, I mentioned that was when it came to light for me on, okay, we've got aldermen and the mayor. Now, I knew we had a mayor, but I didn't know exactly what the roles were. But it was based around COVID, and that was a major, whether it was a social media pandemic, a pandemic, what have you. Everybody was paying attention at that point. And Ken Moore, I've read articles that he's written talking about mental health and the importance of mental health, especially with our kids. And the data had been out already, but it came out even more as we were getting, deeper into the whole thing in 2021, that the masking, it affects kids' individuality. It affects suicidal ideation. It affects all of these issues that have to do with mental health. And he was supposedly a mental health guy, yet went out of his way when the official mask mandate ended to extend that, to approve and extend it longer. I don't understand that. Do you have any insight there?
The one thing I wonder, and I haven't done a deep dive on this yet, but was there some sort of a federal incentive to extend that? Did we get more money? Or did we have to do that to get money to begin with? But I believe that was probably just his philosophical belief that we should do this. We should
From a
mask our
medical
people.
perspective, though?
Yes.
Okay.
That we should mask our people, that we should threaten to close down businesses if they don't comply, that we should show them that we're going to do the right thing and we're going to follow all the CDC guidelines.
When I go up to New Jersey and I've, due to family members, I've got family all over the country, and I see these places that they locked down completely and all that. A lot of those small businesses went out of business, never to return. I don't know that I saw that as much in Franklin, but you would have a better idea. Were there businesses that had to permanently close their doors?
There were some, but I think they were already teetering on the brink. But I think that we here more than anywhere else in the country, because we did have a real estate office in Chicago, which we still have. So we would have to travel back there periodically. And the difference was so significant. And I'd laughingly, when I'd go up there just for the day, I'd laugh and say, well, meanwhile, back in Franklin, it was like nothing ever happened. But up there, they were turning people in. There was contact tracing. They were in masks. There was fear. It was so different. But then this mayor kept masking us. And I was a resistor. I'm sorry. I don't believe in mandates for anything, for vaccines, for masks. I believe you should open your business, close your business as you see fit. Yeah.
I love it. Next big issue that was a hot topic earlier this year, but I want to go back into the past a little bit. So Gay Pride, the event in Franklin, there's been 2 now, right? There's been 2 of them.
3.
3. Okay. So the first time you voted yes to it, and then you changed your vote the next time to no. Tell me about that.
Correct. So the 3-year history, this is from what I ascertained from speaking to the head of Pride. The first year they had it, it was just a little meetup on a corner with a flag with a couple dozen people and just a little bit of a rally, and that was it.
Okay.
The fine, dandy, not a problem. So the next year they came to us, and that was my first elected year to vote on it in 2022. So we had absolutely no basis to say no. They had done nothing wrong. There was nothing to indicate there were going to be any issues at all until the event happened. And it was immediate backlash, texts, emails, angry, horrified, disgusted. Supposedly the city took it up with them. There was no resolution, no real remorse, obviously.
Well, you would know, though. You were an alderman.
No, we don't get included on those debriefs.
Okay. Who does?
The mayor, the communications department, and the city manager.
Interesting.
Because if we convene as a group, then it becomes a public meeting, and then the public is invited in, so they don't oftentimes
Sounds like a plan.
do that. So what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors philosophy. So supposedly there was enough remorse that made them feel okay about 2023. But for me, I felt like if they had done this once, they would continue to push the envelope. But I did say yes because I had no basis to say no, and they had every right to have their event in 2022. When 2023 rolled around, I had the conversation with Robert McNamara myself. I wanted to hear it for myself. I wanted to get the tone. I wanted to understand what they were doing. I offered to help them make sure it was family friendly, to maybe move it to a private site versus public. But I was met with resistance on every level. I did my research. I found out about people they had denied to be in it that were gay, but that were celibate because they said that their show was about sex and romance and not about just being gay or celibate. They couldn't honor those things. So I, in all decency, I just could not say yes to that. The damage that could be done to our community, to our children, was far too great, and I had to say no for 2023.
Okay, that makes sense, especially from a legal perspective. What about the influence of the people in general? You know, I was not at the BOMA meeting, but I've seen plenty of videos. I've heard from multiple sources. I would guess, based on what I've heard, that 75% of the folks there were hoping that you guys would vote no, and that all the aldermen knew that. The mayor knew it. And, you know, he was visibly nervous when he had to make that tiebreaker. And he said, I'm going to vote to approve this, but don't get up and leave. Famous statement. Why? You know, why wouldn't they be taking into account what the majority of the people were wanting at that meeting?
Because from the executive office, we don't run a representative form of government here. We run a form of government that caters to an elite few.
From the executive office?
From the executive office level. That's the whole problem that we have here. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. So they should have, in a representative government, looked at the overwhelming evidence, but the city attorney put the fear of God in them. We could get sued. But we had a constitutional attorney send us a multi-page letter stating what is the worst possible outcome? What is the case history for communities who have said no, who have either gotten sued or not gotten sued in some instances in the state of Tennessee? And she poo-pooed it all. Of course, what would he know? He's only one in front of the United States Supreme Court.
Sounds like fear's an awfully good tactic to use against, like, if fear getting sued, I can do anything.
But now they're getting sued and they don't have a leg to stand on because of the arrest of the guy in the Jesus shirt.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. So you knew that I got kicked out?
You did?
I got kicked out.
Wow.
I've got a video and everything. The people I were with, we were praying at the event 200 feet away. I'd gone through and been nice and spoken to a few folks with, they're selling things and all this. But then later on walked away, and Brian Russell, a guy in the group, he prayed. We get done with the prayer, look up, and here come 7 cops. And
Wow.
and they said, you can have your First Amendment right over there. This is a private event, and we have the ability to, as the, I don't know what you call the event host or whatever, we can tell the police to kick out anybody we want. So they did. They escorted us out. And then later on, I got the videos about Joe, the guy that actually got arrested. I think he spent some time in Williams County Jail. What's the question here? First of all, they call it a private event. Was it? I thought it was open to the public. I just want to get your point of view on that whole thing.
In my opinion, it was a public event on a public space because they were begging the public to come. This was not a private event with ticketed only. This was a public event on public space. I realized that it probably went against what they wanted, but if they wanted us to respect their rights, they should have respected everyone else's rights. And I did hear about ladies turned away because they had a Bible in their purse.
I got that on video.
But yet, a lady that had a switchblade was let in because they felt like she looked like their kind of people. So they let her in with a switchblade. So I guess the Bible could do more damage than a switchblade. And then I didn't realize you were part of the prayer group that was asked to leave. But with Joe, the public is not really aware that he was arrested and charged with a criminal crime, and he's up for prosecution on November the 7th. They have not chosen to dismiss the charges on July 27th or on September 5th, and they are going to trial on November 7th.
Wow.
For wearing a Jesus shirt and professing his faith in Christ at a church booth at a public event on public space.
If that doesn't tell you about the direction that our city is currently going, the trajectory, then I don't know what will. Because you've got a guy there at a public event. He wasn't being violent, and he was able by law enforcement to be arrested and taken out of there. Do you think Mayor Moore saw that coming?
Absolutely not. But there has been a systematic attack on Christianity since I got elected. Right out of the gate, somebody came to me with a zoning change request where a local residents had worked through an alderman to strip a church of their zoning because they were mad about parking. And if they'd stripped that church of its zoning, their loan would have been called. They would have lost their money, lost their church building. It would have been disastrous. So that was right out of the gate. Had to defend them. Then shortly thereafter, there was a little Hispanic church that was historic that painted their brick white. And they were raked over the coals, made to grovel in front of a committee, had to end up stripping the paint off. They're probably out $20,000 between painting and unpainting this church.
Okay.
But yet 1 block away was a wealthy white man who painted his historic brick white, and nobody said a word.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And then last December, we were faced with protecting Jeff Daniels, a worship and prayer leader who would go out on our square every Saturday night since COVID and lead people to the Lord, do praise and worship, pray with people. And they had duped us into passing an ordinance the summer of 22. And they forgot to give us the second page that showed the fines, penalties, and what it really meant. And I kept asking, does this have anything to do with him? Oh, no, not really. But it really did, and they were to the point they were about to arrest him from what we had been told. They did an about face and said, oh, we would never have arrested him, but I don't know how the conversation would have gotten started if they weren't. So that started and went on the first 2 or 3 months of the year till we were able to adjust that ordinance to accommodate for him and others who wish to express themselves. And then we rolled right into the pride situation.
What do you, behind those alderman votes, is there something more going on there? Because I think a lot of the public would have, we didn't know who these people were maybe necessarily, but then we went and did our research. Like, oh, he goes to this church, she goes to that church. They're probably going to stand with this, moral majority that's at the BOMA meeting. And then the vote was split, and there were some surprising, yes votes in there before Mayor Moore's. Why do you think that was?
Fear, weakness, and a lack of Christian conviction. I mean, you've got to realize it's not just a church. Just because it says it's a church, just because it's big, just because it's small, just because it's a certain brand or denomination doesn't mean they're really teaching Christianity and that they're really sold out for Christ and really teaching the word. And that's your difference. You can be Christian in name only. You can think you're a Christian, but are you really following Scripture? Are you really following the biblical word when it comes to that? And I think they veered off course, and they said their pastors were the one that told them to do it.
Well, a lot of times people that do hold the faith in their heart, but they make a decision that's against that. Like you said, it's out of fear, but fear of loss many times. What about powerful string pullers behind the scenes? Is there any of that going on where if somebody were to, not vote the way that these string pullers say, it could hurt them financially, business wise?
In the political arena, it's known as a control file. And I absolutely am convinced there's at least one control file on our board, if not a couple.
Okay, interesting. You want to say more?
That's enough.
Okay. You mentioned Chicago earlier, and a lot of big cities in this country, we could rattle them all off, but used to, these were places we could be proud of, whether it's Baltimore, Boston, Detroit. You go back 50 years, you see the pictures like, man, this is a cool place. And then they've gone off the rails, and Chicago would be another one of those. What was your experience like in Chicago through, I don't know how long you were there, but I'm sure it was a while. And how does that inform the way that you're looking at Franklin now?
Since 95,
Okay.
I was in Chicago, and boy, I got to tell you, I mean, it was a big difference coming from Texas to Chicago. I'd never really spent any time in the Midwest, much less Chicago. That's a real Yankee. But I remember when I moved downtown, and I said, wow, I am like the luckiest girl alive to live down here. It was vibrant. It had been completely newly revitalized. It was so safe. People were so nice. It was clean. It was really expensive.
This is mid-90s in Chicago.
But by this time, it was like around 2000.
So it was still rocking and rolling.
It was phenomenal. But Daley was still in office, and he ran a really tight machine. There was still some mob activity, and like it or not, the mob ran a really tight ship. So there wasn't that kind of crime that we have, and they knew that there would be repercussions if they crossed those boundaries. So it was really safe, really organized while they did their behind-the-scenes crime and got by with it.
Yep.
But it was still a different environment. But once Daley stepped out of office, that's when we saw the tumble. The taxes rose, the crime increased. By then, the mob had either mostly died off or been put in jail for various things. So we saw a complete decay of the system in Chicago. And then there was Rahm Emanuel, then Lori Lightfoot, and now, as if it could be worse, we have worse in office, and Brandon Johnson. So and they become sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And sadly, the unions take over, and the wages are high, and then the taxes rise, and people are pension dependent, and the state's hemorrhaging money. So that's what you start seeing in these cities. And that's why here it's been so apparent that it is all about leadership. And leadership that sets that tone is critical to how this community ends up. And never should a city should be so solid in their foundation that if there's a little deviation in that leadership, you still have that core. But just like in Chicago, the second Daley stepped out, it all crumbled. It was all based on that one man. So we've got to build up such a cultural foundation that we won't waver. And let's say we get a mayor in for 4 years that's not the right one, that we can still hold it together, but we have to build that infrastructure first, because we don't have it right now. We're just a PR machine at this point, spewing out Hallmark movie. Yes, this is the greatest place on earth.
Yeah, and still getting a lot of people moving here for
they
that
buy
reason.
right into it.
That's a unique thought there. The people in even on my street, the last two people that have moved in are Portland, Oregon, Seattle, and then the lady next door to New Jersey. Great people. They moved here for the right reasons. And they've been surprised by something. We thought by moving here, they lived here maybe 4 or 5 months, but they had their eyes on the politics of Middle Tennessee and of Franklin. They've been surprised at the people who have been born here, raised here. Not that you can paint everybody with a broad brushstroke, but they're just like, I thought these people would be fighters. There's a reason why we moved here. And I've noticed that a lot of those out-of-towners are actually more involved than the people who have been here their whole life. Why do you think that is?
Tennessee was a blue state up until about 15 years ago, and we've made this progress into a Republican state. So we still have a lot of traces in especially our old-time residents, that it was okay to be a Democrat. And back then it was totally different, where they can't even imagine the AOC as the face of the Democratic Party now. They were very conservative as Democrats, but they're taking that Democratic foundation with them into this Republican voting arena. So that's what we're seeing. And the other thing is, they haven't been to Chicago. They haven't spent any time in New Jersey. They haven't been to California to witness firsthand the lack of freedom and the civil liberties that are being taken away in those cities. And they just can't imagine, honestly, they cannot fathom why that would never happen here in Franklin. But it is happening, and it is here. So you do need to be from somewhere else to see it. call it out, and then fight like heck to make sure we stop it and don't ever let it happen here.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you a question you probably don't normally get asked. So you were around Mayor Moore every day, almost, I would say. What did he really do well? What's something that you could look at and say that was an area that I respected what he did?
He's very charming and he works very well with PR. Very, very well. He's a great PR guy. He can really present well and look good for the city in large groups of people and one-on-one.
That's important.
And that is very important.
Yeah. Okay. If he's elected again, what do you think? Because that's 4-year term. 4 years from now, what are things going to look like in Franklin?
I think we're going to be more like Atlanta. We're gonna have a continued increase of crime because we are seeing that escalate. We're going to see more multifamily housing. We're going to see less value for our money in housing. We're going to see increased property taxes. We're going to see a continued path of destruction in our school system and in our children's lives. We're going to see inappropriate behavior, and I think it could end up like a Bucks County. I really do. I don't think we even need 4 years. I think on the path we're on, I think in 2 years, we can pretty much hang it up. There's not going to be much left.
And is it recoverable at that point?
No. This is the final recovery point. This is it. If we don't put the brakes on now and correct what's already out there, there's not going to be much to salvage.
When it comes to this election, it's on the 24th, right?
Yes, early voting, October 4th through 19th.
All right, so we got early voting. How many votes does it take to win?
A lot, but only one more than the opponent has.
Well, let me ask the question a different way. What percentage historically of Franklin citizens have voted?
Dismal. We've had, on average, 7%, 9%. We saw 11% last year. During my last election, 12.35%, which was huge.
Which is still dismal.
Yeah, I would like to see a 20% turnout, but I'm just not seeing it. People just don't realize what's at stake. A lot of people, as we've knocked on doors, didn't even know that there was an election coming up. So this is the make or break. So every vote counts right now.
And to me, with that low of a constituency voting, anything's possible.
Anything.
Yeah. So Gabrielle, if you get in office, and this is your softball question, what's the key 2 or 3 things that you'll bring to the table that no one else would?
Town halls every month, Sunday afternoon, free drinks and snacks, and you can come and ask any questions you want, and you will not be gavelled out. I want the public in City Hall. I want them to know who works there. I want them to know what they do, why it's important for them to get involved. I want them to know what's coming up the next quarter on our agenda so they'll have time to look into it, ask questions, get involved in it. I really want 100% participation with the citizens. I don't want this to be led by an executive team or by a 5-block radius. I want this to be led by the whole community, and that's the only way for the community to get to know City Hall is to have them come in, open door.
I love that. So there's not currently town halls?
Nope.
Okay. All right. This is one I really struggle with when I see all these pundits on TV, and guys even that I like Tucker Carlson. They're always talking about protecting our democracy. Everything democracy. And I'm always thinking, I was taught that this was a constitutional republic, and, just like the Pledge of Allegiance, and to the republic for which it stands. Is there something going on there with the language? And I don't mean to beat up on Tucker. I just think he's been sucked into it like the rest of us. Are we a republic or a democracy? Where do you land on all that?
We're a constitutional republic, for me, based on how we were founded. But they see us as a democracy compared to other countries. But then I see European countries that consider themselves democracies, and they're nothing like us. So I believe we're a republic and not a democracy.
What's the difference?
I believe in a republic, we are of the people, by the people, for the people. A democracy can lead to totalitarianism and kind of that head of the community, which then leads to other things that we don't want. But in a republic, we all have a voice, we all have a say, and we have inalienable rights as citizens.
Absolutely. Well, I agree with that. Why don't you give us your last word? We'll close it out.
This is probably the most significant election in the history of Franklin, Tennessee. It's the biggest battle since the Battle of Franklin. This is the battle for our heart, our soul, our culture, your children and your grandchildren's future. It's critical that you vote, get involved, spread the word. Early voting, October 4th through 19th, Election Day, October 24th.
All right, Gabrielle, thanks so much for coming
Thank you.
on. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for joining us. And bear with me on the technical aspects of this. When I pull in Gabrielle here in a minute, it might take a second to set her up because this is not BlackRock owned Channel 5 news. So just be patient on that. But, you know, it's been a week since we did that interview. There was a lot of events that happened, and I didn't want to cannibalize, my views or those events with trying to put this out the same night. But since that time, there's been a lot of news stories. There's been a lot of talk. And today's the first day of early voting. So we decided that tonight would be a good night for Gabrielle to come back on and answer some questions live, and as well as questions from you guys in the live chat. So I'll be kind of looking down, checking those. This is where I need you to be patient because I'm going to pull her in right now. Here we go. All right. Gabrielle, can you hear me?
Hi, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we hear you perfect. Everything looks good. All right. Well, like I was saying, it's been a week since that interview. And today, when I was walking in to vote, I overheard a couple ladies behind me, and it was just funny. They said, all you have to do is watch the news to know who to vote for. It's as simple as that. And then they said, Gabrielle, I think she was promoting prostitution and she had an alias. It's simple. You just have to watch the news. So unfortunately, legacy media in Nashville does still have a pretty tight grip on some people's minds. Well, and at the same time, if they can actually find real dirt, obviously they're going to use it. So my first question is this: from a 10,000 foot level, it kind of feels to me like you and your team have not really pushed back on a lot of it, or not quick enough, I would say, and allowed the other side to somewhat control the narrative. What would you say to that?
It doesn't matter what you say or what you post, they're still going to counter it and come up with something else, because everything we have posted, they've denied or said it's not true or tried to come up with other theories. So at a certain point, you just let them run and burn themselves out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's your chance to clear the air then on most of these issues. I told you ahead of time I was going to ask some of the hard ones because, we're getting
Please do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the public does deserve to hear it from you. So number one, let's start with the whole residence thing. So I looked a little deeper into that story that had been put out there. And, there was the question of where does Gabrielle live? Then there was the question also of, well, where does her husband live? And do they have two residences? So what is the deal with that? Is there a residence in Illinois and in Franklin?
There is. We bought a condo in 2004, I believe it was, in downtown Chicago, and it's maintained in my husband's name. We have a real estate office there still. He's been in commercial real estate for over 40 years. We have to have a land-based office to maintain a license there. He has commercial clients from way back after you've been in the business that long, and it lives up there a lot of the time, and I'm up there maybe a couple of days a month. In about 2015, I think, I maybe quit claim deeded off of that because I was purchasing my home here in Tennessee, since this is my home base and where I live, and we commute back and forth. It's really no different than having, let's say, a home in 30A. Since COVID, there's a lot of people commuting from state to state for work because they can work remotely, and we both have that luxury. And he's from Illinois. He's been in Illinois all of his life, but he comes here and helps me with the campaign. He comes here to spend time with me and the daughter, and then we go up there for a couple of days as well.
On a personal note, do you wish that he could be here full time? Because as you've said, this is an extremely important election. So I would think it would be good if he was just here all the time.
I wish. We'd have to build another closet.
All right. Well, maybe, but from a legal perspective, though, there is no issues on having two homes where he's up there a lot of the time and all that.
No.
Okay.
No, none at all. Because I was almost 40 when we got married, he was almost 50. We've always filed married, filing separate, because we had established lives when we got married. We were adults.
Understood. All right. Well, the next one, and this has bothered a lot of people on the conservative side, and they want the real story on it. And of course, the left is running with it. So, what is the real story on your husband? It's 2008. There's a pride parade, and here comes a picture of him in a Speedo. You knew it was probably gonna surface somehow. So, do you feel that this contradicts your family's moral stance against the pride parade here in Franklin?
No, and you have to take it in context, and here's why. There's a whole lot of whys to this. Number one, this whole controversy with him being in the Speedo actually caused us to sit down and talk about how the Pride movement has changed since 2008. In 2008, every single person knew, don't go to Boys Town for the Pride Parade in Chicago unless you are ready for something like Mardi Gras, where people are absolutely drunk out of their mind, scantily clad, if clad at all, and there's nothing family friendly there, and they never promoted family friendly or kid friendly. But now you fast forward to the last 2 or 3 years, now the Pride movement has shifted their focus to family friendly and children, but kind of kept the same genre. So it was really interesting to look at that perspective. But in 2008, he was appointed to run for Congress as a Republican in the Illinois 5th District. And that area encompassed a vast majority of his voters that were in an area known as Boys Town, the gay district of Chicago. So he knew as a Republican, if he opened his mouth, he was going to lose the voters. So his strategist suggested the Pride Parade was coming up, that for only the second time in the history of the Pride Parade, he could get Tom into that parade to walk, because Tom would not in any way be derogatory or offensive to them, because he respects their choice to be gay or to be heterosexual. He doesn't have a problem with that at all. So he is an avid swimmer. He was a competition swimmer when he was young. And please, everybody just know that's who it was at the West Haven pool. That's why you never see me at the pool with him. He still wears a Speedo today because he swims lap after lap after lap. So for him, in a Speedo was not quite as far a stretch as it would be for the average guy. So he did walk in that parade with almost 500, 600,000 people for the exposure. Now, we thought at the time it would probably be picked up in the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times or somewhere else, and it never did. So now here 15 years later, it's shown up, and all I can say is thank goodness he was thin enough to wear that in public.
Well, now what about his politics though? Is he slightly purple? Is that kind of what it is as
Oh,
well?
no. He's very red.
So he stands with you on the issues. Because I got to say, one thing I don't trust is when a politician has a wife or a husband that is far from their own political views, just because that's part of the core of who you are. So I'll hear that often, like, oh, well, my husband's a Democrat and whatever. And it's, yeah, so that would bother me. I'm glad to hear that he's on the same page.
So that's a house divided, and it couldn't stand. And no, we're very much on the same page.
Okay. All right. I was at the candidate forum the other night in Franklin. I believe it was Monday night. And the first thing I want to say is throughout that event, there was zero violence, and it was actually pretty boring. I kind of was like, it wasn't chaos, the way that Phil described the previous one. But when I saw those guys as I walked in, they were tatted up. There was somewhere in full covering of face mask. I just originally assumed this has got to be Antifa. That has to be what it is. And then I was told from somebody inside, no, they're with a white supremacy group. And at that point, I was like, oh, this is a plant. That's what this is, because you just don't see that in Franklin. And Gabrielle, I've known you now for a few months, and I've got to know a lot of the people with your campaign. It's not that wasn't reflective of you. So I just like, okay, what's going on here? So I walked up to the guy with the face tattoos, and I talked to him. He was actually very, very friendly to me. And he said, we're just here to, what's the way that I worded it here? He said he was here to support and protect you. And then I said, are you really with a white supremacy group? He said, yes, we're a white nationalist group. Then I was confused at that point, but I thought it could still be a plant. I don't know. So while members of the public can support whoever they want, the opposition is obviously tying you to that. They're saying you're part of a white supremacy group or you're secretly aligned with them. So what's really the truth?
No, I've never been aligned with a white supremacy group. I have never been aligned with a Nazi or neo Nazi group either. This group, from what I understand, they are a group that is anti Antifa, and they do deep dive cybersecurity, dark web, and they had noticed through multiple posts through a local liberal publication run by a local individual from College Grove that's head of our Antifa in Tennessee, that there were some links to the mayor and some direct threats of disrupting our meetings, and that some of those individuals had actually been in our meetings several times. And surprisingly for the public to know that Antifa members actually look more like you and I. They don't stand out like the individuals that came, but I did not pay those individuals. I did not ask them to be there on my behalf. I have a professional security firm that is with me anytime I'm out in the public. So I always have my security detail with me at all times. And they had concerns, not only from me, but I think they had concerns for all of Franklin at that event based on what they saw online.
Okay. Now, was there a press release that that you've put out?
I did, and they did as well.
I'm going to see if I can get that
So
real quick on the screen here.
Find that out there.
Okay. Yeah, you keep going. I'm going to pull it up right here while you're talking.
So it's a concern to think that, we've seen reports in Seattle, Portland, where there's heavy, and even in Chicago, heavy Antifa activity, to know that they're this close to home, and that we have a mayor who's actively linking with them and anti-gun activists as well. That's not the image of Franklin any of us have.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not. Am I coming through okay? I'm hearing an echo.
You are. I can see it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. One thing that seems awfully hypocritical about this whole thing is, none of us are saying that we're white supremacists or aligned with that whatsoever. But, when you're talking about a show of force and violence and all that, had it been Antifa or had it been BLM all around, like they might, turn around and start attacking the building itself. We saw that for an entire year, and they would call it a peaceful protest. But in this case, you've got some guys that look pretty rough, and they're standing at the front of the building being friendly, actually, and they have to make it into something and try to tie you with it. So I think that's very unfair, and I think it's dishonest.
And I'm gonna say this, and people will read the social media post. Brad is one of my clients. I have their listing, and I have had their listing. But if you based me on all the clients that I'm representing currently, I would be a white supremacist, neo-Nazi. I would be a lesbian like my one client, and I would be Black too. So that is who I would be if you're going to blame me for the clients that I represent, because those are the clients at this very moment that I'm representing. And I would probably be a Muslim jihadist as well, because I have a Middle Eastern client too.
Yeah, well, they can add that to the. I'm sure you've started new research right there for your opposition.
But instead, I'm just labeled as a domestic terrorist according to a major organization, because I'm a Christian nationalist, because I'm a conservative Christian.
Yeah, great point. They are not afraid to call just concerned moms and dads at school board meetings domestic terrorists. It's amazing, but that's a different story. I want to know the real truth from you about this alias thing. So there's been all this chatter about the name Julie Newhouse, as well as some things about your maiden name. And most people are not going to go back and dig into the history of these documents. They're just going to, like that girl said, walking into the voting booth, all you got to do is watch the news. So I want to hear from you. What's really going on here? Did you use an alias?
Well, I'll tell you what, when I watch the news, I see that Biden is one of our most popular presidents ever, and we have no inflation going on. So yes, I'll address that. I've never heard the name either, so I was as shocked as everybody. So I've got on recording on this phone over an hour of conversations with legal of the Texas Department of Public Safety, who could find zero record of even me ever existing in Texas at an address, date of birth, or name. My maiden name was Bush. They said they don't keep records that long. I have it on recording with legal from the Texas Department of Public Safety because they said that's where one of the documents came from. And then I have the other document from Florida. And they also said that Julie Newhouse was on a warranty deed in Volusia County. But after speaking to the chief clerk in Volusia County, I got the warranty deed. And they also looked up every spelling for that other name. And nobody in the history of that county has ever owned property under that name. And the warranty deed only shows my parents and then myself in the name that I've always had. Then I had a forensic done on the other document from Florida where they said there's a corporate filing. And he said, I sent it to my national agency contact and he laughed. In seconds, we can tell it's not legit. We review passport fraud. It's so easy to say this is fabricated and it's an expletive word at best.
Yeah. Well,
that comes from a top authority.
Okay. Well, it's great that you have that documentation. Are you going to be able to provide that in any form to the public, like so they can actually see these receipts?
Sure, they can reach out if they want to see it. I was flattered when they showed up at a BOMA meeting. They had some special shirts made up from the Young Democrats, and they were really cute.
Okay.
So I got to hand it to them. They're very creative.
There's no doubt about that. All right. So there's getting, let's see, I'm looking through my notes here. All right. To me, it feels like Franklin is a bubble, with many longtime residents thinking that Franklin politics aren't really affected by what's going on across the world. We talked about this briefly in our recorded interview too. How important do you feel that it is for local folks to understand the context of these global institutions, whether they're medical, like the World Health Organization, or corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard, that are shifting the needle towards like a communistic control and away from individual freedoms?
It starts in our schools. We've seen that. The parents are out of their minds fighting. In our schools, they're indoctrinating our children. They place people in the Department of Education that help propagate this in our children. Then they propagate it more in city officials, city staff, very subtly, but over like a drip campaign, conditioning you for smart cities, for smart technology, for 15-minute cities, for climate change, for climate crisis, for ESG, for mandates, whether they're medical or otherwise. So they're always doing the soft conditioning to prepare you for that. And I do think in Franklin, people think, oh, well, that would never happen here, including some of our staff or elected officials. And I hear signs that they've bought into the goods because we're talking about electric buses and bus lanes and autonomous vehicles and smart this and smart that and sustainability. And it gets a little bit scary. It's getting a little too dystopian. And in one of the Franklin Tomorrow or Frank Talks in the last month, they had Gresham Smith in talking about a monitoring device that individuals could wear, and it would monitor their stress level and heart rate when they went by a certain area of town or building. And they were trying to monitor what is triggers for stress or mental health. But nobody ever talked about the fact that's tracking device.
Yeah, and what I think is a lot of people on the left or in the middle, they immediately think, well, what could be good about that? What could be really a positive thing about that? Well, maybe you're really stressed, you don't know it, you're in danger because your heart rate's up. But they don't take into account your entire body, the rhythms of your body, your speech. Our phones are tracking devices now. Elon Musk is talking about the Neuralink, the brain chip that he's been working on. Like they want to control everything. And it kind of goes back to my question of, do you feel that it's important? Because these things, why it matters. Do you feel that the average Franklin resident is aware of these things?
I think the average, I'd say it's probably a 60-40, 60 being aware. I brought this up at the forum a week ago about the CBDC digital currency even, and the mayor seemed to be very unaware of it. Super concerning because it is coming.
That was my next question. So Mayor Moore, it's like, in my opinion, if you're purple, I feel like you're kind of making decisions in a bubble with this 20-year-old thought process of, well, you got the old right and the old left of Tennessee, and we're just kind of tugging it out, and I'm always going to play the middle because that serves the most people. I don't think he's seeing is there's a larger wave, not just statewide, not just nationwide, but internationally, globally, to break down borders, to indoctrinate with DEI, all those things. Is he aware of that whole system, or do you think he's on board with it?
I don't believe he is cognitive of it to the point of being resistant to it.
Okay.
I think he's heard tidbits, but doesn't think it would apply to us or that it would ever get down to our level. But
Okay.
it has obviously influenced a lot of his decisions subliminally.
Okay. I would, that's kind of the take I've had as well. You mentioned the schools, the importance of education and the way that indoctrination can happen there, which leads us to our first live Q&A. This is straight off that. So
Okay.
This person wrote, I have a question for the live portion. We've seen a lot of, that was the wrong one. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Does the mayor and alderman have any sway over the schools? How can we get conservative values back in the schools?
I just want to say I'm so grateful that the city and the mayor of Alderman, the mayor, do not have any direct control over the schools. But I do believe that through crafted legislation that's very carefully done, we could influence the schools as well as setting the tone and the expectation for what we consider to be reasonable conduct in our community and on our public property. That's how we set the agenda in our schools, by stating as a citywide policy, this is not acceptable. Is what we're about. And it really tones down what's going to trickle down into the school system.
Okay. Are there currently any links between the school board or the school system and the mayor right now, or the alderman?
None that I know of. None.
All right. Let's see. We've seen a lot of attention on West Haven. What in your track record supports you as a candidate that truly represents all of Franklin? So not just West Haven. And then they said minorities and underprivileged.
I think you can go back and look at some of my posts. And if you don't have them, I can send pictures. Video of me helping out with a community toy drive in one of our least prosperous neighborhoods at Christmas, trying to drum up toy donations, donned my Mrs. Santa outfit to help distribute the toys in that neighborhood, helping with a cancer walk in another socioeconomically depressed area of town. I've been a really strong voice of just getting out and getting in the community, and also with one of our other Black organizations, helping with some of their events as well. I think it's so important for them to be heard and to be a part of the discussion. It's critical.
What would you say then, to go back to our recorded interview, to an African-American, constituent that says, well, hey, I want terror markers because that is helping to describe the history of Franklin?
I'd want them to tell me, why do you want it, and give me the 3 benefits, and give me the long-term effect of those benefits on our community and on your friends, family, neighbors. Why is this a good thing? And then we talk through the alternatives of, well, if we talked about that, let's talk about how many African Americans have actually graduated from high school in Franklin, gone on to get college degrees and be wildly successful. Let's talk about the successes. Let's talk about the what can be if somebody dreams it, and help them achieve their dream.
Okay. I think that's a good answer. And to me, like, America historically has been about, we're always striving toward a more perfect union. Yes, we've got some sins in our past, but to build a prosperous American dream is all about people having a good attitude, learning from the past and moving forward, not dwelling on it continuously. And that does seem like that's where the other side is landing. It's just like,
it reminds me of CRT, where you're saying,
yes,
you're ashamed to be something that's white, and how horrible for a young African American child to read a terror marker innocently and feel badly about what happened in the past, and let that somehow have a mental health effect on them that lasts for a lifetime, instead of saying, it doesn't matter if I'm African American, I'm created equal in God's eyes, and there's nothing that I can't achieve if I put my head to it.
Absolutely. All right. I was going to leave the schools alone, but somebody just wrote a very interesting question. They said, is it true that Mayor Kenmore's campaign manager is the wife of the vice president of Pfizer that James O'Keefe exposed at a school board meeting recently?
I believe it to be so. She was always his campaign manager in the past, from what he describes to me and some lunches we've had at the city hall. He's known her before she even married Josh Brown, and she was always running his campaigns. And people have said, trust me, I don't have time to get on social media and check who's doing what or who's saying what, but it's widely known that she is operating his campaign.
Okay. Well, I asked earlier if there was
He
any
is
direct
married to
links.
Josh
That
Brown.
that sounds like a link to me. So worth exploring. This person would like to understand more about the Middle Eight project and how does the $100 million new city hall affect our taxes long term?
Okay, Middle Eight, real quick overview. I think it is one of the most beautifully designed projects I've ever seen. It was so beautiful it screamed, make me want to move. However, it didn't look in the original drawings it looked about half the size it is. I thought it looked like about 100, 150 units. The reality was about 275. They have since scaled it back a little bit. I have concerns about not only the flooding, because there's a floodplain that sets in right next to the property, but we have really fragile, very historic homes that back up to this area. And once they start blasting for below grade garage, I really have my concerns about the structural soundness of what is going to happen to those homes around it. And those are very narrow, non-curbed streets where there's no real parking anyway, and they're limiting the number of parking spaces per unit. And although I think being next to the factory in a factory district sounds very exciting, I just think it's too large and too complex to go there. But first and foremost, to me, I don't believe the citizens' voices were heard on this. They begged, they pleaded, and it all fell on deaf ears. And this goes back to so many things that are happening in our city where the constituents' voices are just not being honored.
Okay. And then what about the taxes? They said they
Now,
wanted to know how it would affect their taxes long term.
the city hall, now the city hall is not middle eight. The city hall is definitely going to have to be replaced. We're past the usable life. We have two viable options and possible other options. I come from a commercial real estate background. I know how much it costs to get things built, and I also know that with government, it always costs more to get it built because they're not in the business of conducting business so much. So I don't think we need a Taj Mahal. I believe that we need a great Class A building on a larger site by our police station for a civic complex so that we could potentially pay cash. We have some great reserves in our capital fund to pay a large portion of this. So I'd love to see cash go in on this and very few bonds. If we weigh down our bonds, we're probably going to have a tax increase. We've got a small retail component in it that will help with a little bit of an offset. But even more than that, concerning was about a $40,000, what we call cash reserve or rainy day fund. But if you think about a $200 million a year budget, $40 million on a rainy day, if the market is tanking,
Yeah.
is not going to get us very far. So I think we really have to be careful here.
Okay.
No property tax increases, please.
Would say that again. I'm sorry.
I don't want any property tax increases.
Okay, right. Okay. Very good. Someone has mentioned Franklin is giving $300,000 to, and I may be reading this a little wrong. Someone has mentioned Franklin giving $300,000 to In-N-Out Burger, I believe at the factory, in addition to what Tennessee has provided. So first of all, I don't know if that's true. And then second, how does it affect residents?
Doesn't have anything to do with the factory. It's out by Berry Farm.
Okay.
It's about 2.5 million from the state, 1.7 million from the county, which it does come out of our coffers to some degree, and then another 300,000 from the city. But again, I go back to the point that we never went to our constituents with that to see if that was something they wanted to do. We were never asked about it, even in like an NDA where it was a confidential company with an opportunity given. It was just kind of done behind closed doors and, well, here it is, and we need you to vote yes because we've already kind of done it.
Right. Yeah, I had no idea about that one. I'm learning things.
Now, I love In-N-Out Burger. Like, do not get me wrong. Very excited about In-N-Out Burger, but I just think this could have been handled a lot better.
Right. Okay. Let's see here. What positions does the mayor appoint? Do they appoint the city manager and city attorney? And how do those people currently make decisions for Franklin?
The mayor is a person who appoints committee members, but that's a beef I've got about the transparency. And he doesn't think that I should, according to our forum this week. But I don't think even the people that are applying feel like it's very transparent. We need to show the resumes. We need to have them all come in front of BOMA. And I believe that BOMA should ultimately be able to pick the top 3 and then the mayor choose from that so that everybody knows they had a fair and equal chance and the public knows who applied. So I think that process could be refined. Now, the mayor does not have the ability to appoint a city manager, department head. He helps with a committee that would go out and find those people or help make final decisions. And ultimately, the department heads are voted in by BOMA.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. There's a lot of arguing in the live chat as well, so I'm trying to find the good questions. Will you push back on mask mandates if the state or federal mandates start, and how?
No, I won't push back. I'm just going to say flat no. Okay. We will not comply.
All right. And now the cost to that, I mean, is there money that was received for various, compliance factors? I know at the schools, for instance, if they to accept ESSER funding, and I benefited from this, and I'm ashamed of it. I didn't know, because you got this. Like I said before, I was selling roofing and waterproofing projects to the government, and we'd go up to corporate in Cleveland where we made the stuff, and they would constantly talk about, we got to here's the ESSER 2 funding and what it can provide. Here's ESSER 3. It was massive amounts, and from a corporation perspective, they're not reading the fine print on all that stuff, and then come to find out, like, the ESSER funding came with some real strings attached, including CRT and other things. So I guess I say all that to ask about the mask mandates and others. Like, if you don't comply, will the federal government try to hurt you, or the state level government?
Well, it looks like Maury County seemed to be unscathed from that, but there was additional funding under the CARES Act, and I was not with the city at that time, so I'm not privy to all those details. But I would think, like any government fund, there is some equitable component that had to be met in order to receive the largest percentage of funding. And I do know that we were still like dissecting some of it and allocating it to different organizations and entities, definitely in the last year from the CARES Act.
Okay. And just so you know, Gabrielle, a lot of feedback there. If I seem vacant sometimes when you're answering, it's because I know you're answering for the public, but this thing's blowing up in the live chat. So just do I have you for another 10 minutes? You got 10 more? Okay. 10 more minutes. All right. Let's see here. What about the sewer project near Chestnut Bend neighborhood? It's way over budget, not done, and sewage rates going way up. What's going on?
For part of it, it's been a supply chain issue. Others, it's just been part of that supply chain issue that made it so incredibly expensive, and part of it's the technology. There's been an alderman that's worked diligently on it in that area, but I do know some of those homeowners get a lot of aromatherapy from that sewer plant, and I've often said, being on Capitol and just in general, is we seem to have exorbitant expenses for our water and for our sewer in order to maintain it. And it is probably the most expensive delivery that we have in this city. And we have a fantastic department that manages it. But I've got to think that there's a way to contain it. And then as we grow into that southeast and look at more sewer water expansion, I really want to entertain every possible way to expand it and keep it off of the taxpayers, whether through utility district or other means. And really, my heart goes out to the people in Chestnut Bend because there are just times it's stifling and it is frustrating and it takes a long time. And a few things have been maybe some trial and error to get it where it needed to be. And it was incredibly expensive, and we do have a large bond for it.
Okay, very good. Um, Phil Williams seems to have singled Hanson out and repeatedly attacks over and over. Is there no other news for him to cover? Why is he obsessed with destroying you? Is there a history here?
No, but when you're being paid, you need to do what you're being paid for. So he's doing a good job of running his advertorial. One of his earliest posts said that Andy Ogles and myself were career highlights for himself. So if he thinks I'm a career highlight and he's won Emmys and other awards, my goodness, I just can't even imagine. There has to be no other news. But I would say that if they think I'm the crazy lady that cannot be elected, why would they spend 1 ounce of this really expensive media time making sure that everybody knows all of my business, including how many rolls of toilet paper I go through a month, if I'm that crazy lady that can't get elected? That usually says I am not the crazy lady who has a very strong following, and they're concerned that I'm going to get elected because I'm taking on the establishment. How dare me?
All right. Andy AIA, he may have gotten upset and got off. He was asking a lot of questions. I want to get to at least one of those. Let's see here. I scrolled away from it. I'm sorry. Darn. I'm going to find it. Okay. What about you as a candidate? And you've kind of already answered this, but what about you as a candidate aligns with a white supremacy group's beliefs, even if you don't endorse their support? What do you think makes you their supported candidate?
Because I'm running and because I'm attacked by Antifa and they're an anti-Antifa group. So you could say that they're there to support every candidate, not just myself, but every candidate that's running that is anti-Antifa. So it's not just me. The only candidate I know that's pro-Antifa right now is the Mayor Ken Moore.
And could you bring receipts for that?
Well, they posted it. You may want to reach out to them. You saw their post.
If I did, I can't remember. I'll have to look it up.
It was what you flashed on the screen with me. That's all I have too. I'm just basing it on what they said.
Yeah, and that was a brand new press release, and I'm trying to talk to you, so I've not read the whole thing. All right. Will you comment on the current effort at the state level on the part of Franklin building owners seeking tax relief who own non-historic buildings that are nevertheless in historic zones?
Boy, I really want to see this legislation passed and give our building owners a significant break. The county had raised taxes and valuation at the same time, and it's been onerous for many of our commercial property owners, and it's trickled into some of the other properties as well. Greg Lawrence, a county commissioner, is the one who first addressed this. He's just done a fantastic job with this. So many people across the state on board in other small communities with historic downtown areas. It is taking far too long to address this, in my opinion, but it is a bureaucratic process and there is red tape. But these owners, they need relief. It's affecting our small businesses, their ability to make money. They have to pass those taxes on to their tenants. The tenants are small businesses, whether a dog grooming or a cute little clothing boutique, and it's getting onerous. And what we're going to do is turn ourselves into another Aspen, where we can only get a Cartier or name brand stores in our downtown space because the taxes and operating are so high they can't afford it.
Okay. What about corruption? You know, there's been some people that I've talked to, that you've talked to, not going to go into detail here, but corruption, you know, even beyond the city level, but maybe attached to the city, attached to Williamson County, attached to state level politics. Is that an important role for a city mayor to help uncover that? Or is it something that a city mayor would stay out of?
No, I think you have to be involved, and I think you have to be willing to address it when it comes to illicit activity involving your community. it's so critical. It has to stop somewhere. I don't care if it's your friend that's doing it or what is potentially someone that the public would think is respectful and professional in their careers. I think you have to address those things in your community and let them know that you're not going to have a tolerance for that type of corruption within the city of Franklin. You're not going to turn a blind eye. You're not going to pretend it doesn't go on. You're going to face it head on. You're going to run into the storm and you're going to deal with it.
Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that. So we're into early voting now, and early voting ends on is it the 18th?
19th.
The 19th. Okay, on the 19th. So we got about 15 more days. So tell us, Gabrielle, what's the reason that people need to head to the polls and vote for you? That maybe, I think you've already said you were going to do town hall, so I don't want to ask the same question as before. But I guess I'll just give you the final word right here because we're coming up against time.
Okay, this is the battle for the heart and the soul and the very culture of this community that we all love. If you don't get out and vote, and if you don't vote for the right people, I'm going to say right now, within 2 years, you're not going to recognize Franklin. When we're entertaining anti-gun, when we're entertaining Antifa, when we're entertaining inappropriate culture in front of children, this community cannot survive. That's not the foundation we're built on. And I don't want to see this idyllic place destroyed in a short period of time. This is so critical that you get out and vote. October 19th is the end of early voting, and the 24th is election day.
All right. And as you were talking, I thought of one last question that I think should be answered. If somebody's brand new to this, and this is the first time they've ever watched you, maybe they've heard rumors and things, but they don't know who the aldermen are, they don't know who's an incumbent, who's not, where would you direct them to get caught up quickly on who the candidates are and what they believe in? Is there a voter guide or anything like that?
There was a voter guide that went out from Williamson Families, got it in the mail this weekend. And I really urge everybody to pick up that phone or email each candidate individually and speak with them individually. It will make all the difference in the world.
All right.
Do not be swayed by media.
Say that again. I may have talked over you.
Do not be swayed by media.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, Gabrielle, thank you for agreeing to do this. You came on twice, and I really appreciate it. So thank you and best of luck.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Bye-bye.